When we told people that we were going to Alaska, they all seemed to have the same two scenes on their minds: bears fishing for salmon and the northern lights. But after 6 weeks in Alaska, we hadn't witnessed either phenomena. For sure, we had seen the most amazing scenery of our lives, but the two stereotypically Alaskan scenes were missing. We were beginning to think that Alaska's marketing team had oversold these two experiences, and that we'd return to the lower 48 without having witnessed them. But that all was about to change. In our Alaska series finale, the state pulled out all of the stops. If you don't want to be convinced that you need to visit the 49th state, go watch something else. Alaska saved the best for last and put on a show we'll never forget. We begin our story in Fairbanks, Alaska. We had just driven to the Arctic Ocean, where we marked the official start of our Pan-American journey. The only direction to go was south. We had just a couple weeks left in Alaska before we needed to start the drive back to the lower 48 to prepare for the rest of our Pan Am trip, including building out a new truck. The clock was very much ticking, and the weather had started to shift. We were racing the oncoming winter, tracking our pace by the color of the trees. We drove down the Richardson Highway, a less used eastern highway that connects Fairbanks to the southern part of the state, eventually going to Valdez. We spent a night where the Richardson meets the Denali Highway. In this majestic spot, we found a bounty of fresh, wild blueberries. We picked handfuls of the tart fruits, knowing that soon they would be covered by snow. But we couldn't linger. We had to keep moving if we were going to squeeze in all of the places we still had on our list. The next place on our list was Chitina. We camped right near the bridge over the famed Copper River. Now, if you pay close attention, you might notice something about our videos. Whenever there's cold water involved, 90% of the time it's only Heather who gets in. When we got into the Arctic Ocean, she stayed in for twice the time I did. I am a wimp with cold water. But for Heather, plunging into cold water is a celebration of the senses. She and Bruce played in the water while I tried not to get splashed. This stop was really meant to just be a place to sleep and get some work done. We had a lot of planning for our next rig to sort out, so we stopped here to catch up before setting off on our next adventure. Doesn't it always seem that the places you didn't plan to be highlights end up being some of the more memorable on your trip? While we could have stayed in this spot for a few more days, we had plans for an adventure up our sleeves. We continued down the road, which soon turned to dirt. Based on recommendations we found online and the road signage, we aired down to keep our dental work intact. The road, while narrow, was actually in pretty great shape, and it was incredible. It was actually a former railroad, leading to the historic town of McCarthy, or almost to the town. The town doesn't have a publicly accessible road into it. There's a private bridge for residents to use, but all visitors come the same way, over this footbridge. Besides giving the town an old-world charm, limiting cars had another benefit. It allowed dogs to rule the place. There were friendly off-leash dogs everywhere. Soon, Bruce was just one of the locals. We enjoyed a rare, dry evening, walking around the town and eating a delicious dinner. We even made another friend.
Like a little taller than Bruce, otherwise they're very similar.
Yeah. Hi.
What's your name?
The next morning, we were up early, ready to explore past McCarthy. We boarded a shuttle that took us 5 miles down a beat-up dirt road. Our journey to Chitina, then McCarthy, and now Kennecott felt like those classic infomercials. Complete with the line, "But wait, there's more!" The Kennecott mine ghost town was once bustling with hundreds of miners extracting copper from the ground. Now it's one of the best preserved historical sites in Alaska. There are dozens of buildings in various states. Some have been restored, while others are close to collapse. This whole area is encompassed in Wrangell St. Elias National Park, which is the largest national park in the United States. One of our favorite things about this park is that it is dog-friendly. While Bruce couldn't go into the buildings, one of us waited with him outside while the other checked out the exhibits. Remember that thing I said about the infomercial? Well, if you subscribe to our channel today, I'll double your wow. Okay, you don't actually have to subscribe to see what's next, but there is still more to see. Hiking just a few miles past the Kennecott mine is a sight perhaps even more astonishing, the Root Glacier. It is massive. If this wasn't overly apparent in our videos, our method of traveling is to go as deep as we can in certain spots. We relish the opportunity to get to a place early, or to stay late. Spending the night is top prize, and worth whatever it takes so we get to spend quality time in that place. That's why we quit our jobs, sold most of our stuff, and moved into a vehicle, to allow us to spend more time in these magical spaces. We had planned a simple overnight trip. We'd camp out at the foot of the glacier and hike out onto it in the evening, once most of the crowds had gone. After setting up camp, we walked down to the foot of the glacier. We honestly didn't know what to expect. The air immediately dropped what felt like 20 degrees. Slippery? At some points there was great traction, but overall it was very slippery. We didn't have crampons or microspikes with us, so it was slow going. If you come here, bring something to make your shoes grippy. We crept around slowly and carefully, knowing that if we were to fall and get hurt, we were a long way down a very bumpy road from a hospital. The sound of the ice under our feet, coupled with blue and white hues of the glacier, were meditative. As the sun went behind the mountains, we hiked back to our epic campsite and made a fire. Even though we camp quite a bit, fires are somewhat rare for us. Honestly, they're a lot of work, and then you smell like smoke until your next shower, which for us could be many days away. But on this night, warming up next to a campfire was exactly what we needed. The next morning, we began the long process of retracing our steps. We packed up camp, walked back to Kennecott, got on a shuttle to McCarthy, walked across the bridge, and drove the 50 miles of dirt back to Chitina. Upon exiting Chitina, we realized that while we had seen so much, there was one thing on our list we hadn't yet witnessed.
We haven't seen Northern Lights yet. When we first got here, it was closer to the longest days of the year, so there was really no chance to see it because it was light all throughout the night. And the last couple weeks, it does actually get dark for a few hours, but it's been foggy or cloudy pretty much every night that there has been Aurora. So fingers crossed, we are not leaving Alaska without seeing Northern Lights calling it. So we might have to stay a long time, who knows.
With our new ultimatum in place, we got back on the Richardson Highway to check out yet another place we had not had time to see. For most people, Valdez is known for the things that have happened to it, including a 1964 earthquake that nearly leveled the town and the 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill. But visiting today, you'd have no idea. The drive to Valdez was incredible. I know I keep saying it, but the scenery, yet again, was stunning. There were glaciered mountains to one side and the ocean on the other, and there were waterfalls in every direction. We camped along a river to get some work done, and then decided to head to the ocean. We checked out the chaotic scene at the salmon hatchery. Hundreds of thousands of salmon come back here each year because it was where they were born. And fishers of all shapes and sizes were here to catch a meal. All species were surprisingly tolerant of each other, including this black bear. Everybody was just trying to stock up before the winter. And speaking of stockpiles, our salmon supply in our freezer was still strong. But with our departure imminent, we decided yet again to wet a line.
Yeah, that seems like...
At this point of the year, the main salmon that was still around was the coho, known locally as the silver.
Yeah.
While not quite as fatty and pink as the sockeye, it's still a tasty fish. We talked to some locals and learned that the preferred method to catch these fish is to snag them.
Yeah, so
That's
just
right,
let it-
you cast a big weighted hook out and jerk the line back, hoping it catches into a fish. Now, all you fishing purists may say this isn't true fishing. And maybe you're right. But these fish put up a good fight, and the hundreds of local fishermen out didn't seem to care.
Nice. Nice job, honey.
Thank you.
Where's Silver?
We carefully cleaned and packaged our fish, our freezer now filled to the brim with this healthy protein. Now, at this point on our trip, we had seen a lot of glaciers. Dozens viewed from below via the roads, the exit glacier from above, and finally the root glacier on foot. But we still had one glacier activity to try out: paddling. We moseyed over to the Valdez Glacier Lake and set up our pack rafts. The water, as you might suspect, was frigid. And thankfully, we only learned this afterwards, but the water gets up to 650 feet deep in this lake. Again, Alaska outdid itself with the colors and textures in this spot. The highlight of this outing was paddling through a tunnel in the ice. Getting to touch the inside of a centuries-old glacier was a chilling experience. The days were growing measurably shorter. In fact, over the course of just 1 week, the time of sunset was 20 minutes earlier. The leaves were changing colors, and the nights began dipping below freezing. But there was one more spot we wanted to see. This spot required us to leave the US and cross into the Yukon Territory of Canada briefly before popping over the American border.
US over here and Canada over here. Bruce, come here. Come sit in two countries.
What felt like years ago, but was really just a handful of weeks, we had visited Skagway, Alaska. The mass of people from the cruise ships pushed us away quickly, but we were still curious about what southeastern Alaska had to offer. Thankfully, Haines is a far less popular cruise ship destination, and the summer tourist season had seemingly quieted down. However, that didn't mean we would cross back into our home country easily.
All right, so we just crossed the border back into the US less than 24 hours after crossing into Canada yesterday, because we are going to Haines, which is another small town on the coast. And yeah, the US border crossing, they're always intimidating, but this lady definitely had a bone to pick with us because they have instituted new regulations on dogs entering the US since we have been in Alaska. So new this summer, and they're a little confusing. They didn't do a great job of explaining online or in the news exactly what you need for a dog now. They need to have their rabies vaccination. They need to be microchipped, both of which Bruce is good on. They've always needed rabies, but they've never actually checked that in the past. And now there's a new form that you have to fill out on the government website and have a screenshot or a printed out version to show them at the border, which we had heard that there were some new regulations, but we tried to look into it and it was not super clear. And they hadn't checked at our other border crossing. So yeah, we got the slap on the wrist for that. She definitely was not happy with us. I could feel my cheeks getting red. Being yelled at by my teacher is what it felt like. But yeah, so she basically waved us on and said, you better have this the next time you cross the border. They marked our names as non-compliant. So yeah, always a little intimidating, but we're still good to go. And it sounds like it's a pretty easy form to fill out online. So if you are traveling with your pet, I think the rules are a little bit different for cats. I don't know exactly what that entails, but dogs, you definitely need this new form. And I don't know how they would check that your dog is microchipped. They certainly don't have the little magic wand to wave over the chip to see if it's there. Seems like something they're just, I don't know, it's the honor system, I guess. But the form they do actually care about. So lesson learned, we will be good little US citizens next time we cross the border, tomorrow or the next day, because this is just a short trip.
we continued our tradition of walking around the docks before checking out the town. But we were not here for the town. We were here to check out the lake and the river that had a strong salmon and bear population. We drove up to Chilkoot Lake and paddled around. We had experienced 3 days of sun in a row, which, I kid you not, was a record for us this trip. We drove downriver a bit to a spot we had been told about. Now, it doesn't happen every night, but at this spot on the river, there are often grizzly bears seen fishing in the evening. We set up cameras and chairs and waited. There was plenty of wildlife, and we even caught a glimpse of a black bear downriver. But the sun had gotten low in the sky with no sight of bears. At least we had tried. But then, we spotted something downriver, and then something else, a bit smaller. And then all of a sudden, there were 8 grizzly bears fishing, 2 moms with 3 healthy cubs each. Actually, only the adults were fishing, while the cubs played in the water and ate the fish their moms had caught. We were spellbound watching this. Bar none, this was the best wildlife encounter of our lives. But wait, there's more. Eventually, one of the adults crossed the river to try a new spot. Not wanting to be left out, her 3 cubs tried to follow her. But the river was deep and swift, and soon the 3 cubs were being swept down the river. At first it was comical, but the cubs were clearly struggling to escape the current. Thankfully, they eventually made it to slower water and walked back upstream to help Mom eat the salmon she had caught. When people ask me about Alaska, this will be one of the stories I tell. So tonight is our last, or maybe second to last night in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw a bunch of bears today. So we really only have one thing left to check off the list, and that's Aurora Borealis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clear out, and the forecast is a relatively high one tonight. So we are sitting in our sleeping bags, bundled up,
Eating chocolate.
waiting for, hopefully, Northern Lights to come out.
Yeah.
We sat out there for hours, dozing off from time to time, waking up worried we'd missed the show. Now, if someone ever shows you photos they took of Northern Lights on their phone, you might see these crazy majestic colors. And you'll ask, did it really look like that? And if they reply, yes, it did in fact look that good in real life, don't let that person watch your dog. Aurora, while incredible, is far easier to capture with a camera than with the naked eye. But late in the night, we were treated to an absolute show. I'll tell you, it was magnificent. While it was less vivid to us than what you're seeing here, the emotions it conjured were real. It was as if Alaska sensed that we were leaving, begging us not to go. On our final day in the state, we were given 2 parting gifts. Gifts that would cement this place deep into our souls and ensure we'd be back someday. Alaska, we say, was the realization of a lifelong dream. But in reality, our Alaskan journey was the partial realization of many dreams. from childhoods looking at National Geographic, to teenage years spent reading and then watching Into the Wild, and young adulthoods agonizing if we get to see the majestic glaciers before they were lost. But what happens when you finally experience one of your dreams? Does the aching lust simply go away? Vanish like an item crossed off of a to-do list? In other words, are you satisfied? With your bucket list item checked off, are you satiated, ready to move on with your life? A chapter of your story neatly written to be put on a shelf for eternity? My thinking is that when a dream becomes reality, you incorporate that dream into something even grander. Reframe the completion of your goal from a finish line into a mile marker on a greater path. For us, Alaska added fuel to our larger dream of driving the Pan American Highway. Doing the big one. In Alaska, we proved to ourselves that we could do it. And by the time you're viewing this video, we'll already be south of the border, in Mexico or beyond. If this is of interest to you, please consider subscribing to our channel, following us on Instagram, or joining our community on Patreon. We promise to keep the adventures coming.